everybody. Tonight we're going to be talking about the Gemini mechanical slider in stainless by 42COSMO. And it's a very interesting piece. I got it used from a fellow Facebook friend and reviewer, Mr. Kyle Spencer. His channel is Fidget Focused. Please check that out. Put a link in my description. But yes, this is something that I promised I was not going to buy because I didn't like the font. Looks a little bit too much like it says COSMD rather than Cosmo. But I'm glad I got over that. And there's a few drawbacks on this one, but still, very interesting piece, well made, well worth it. We're going to talk about it, take it apart, compare it to a few things that are similar. You know, this does have an interesting, unusual mechanical structure to it on the inside compared to a lot of spring and ball mechanicals. So we're going to cover that in detail. Please stick around. So we won't go into too much detail with this, but here off to the right, I will throw those up again that you saw at the intro screen. These are all of the different models that they had available at the time that they were all available. But I think a lot of them are out of stock at this point in time. There is a store, although I did not buy mine at this store, that still has a few in stock and still had the fairest prices. They only had titanium and stainless steel, but stainless steel was $60 and titanium was $75. Now that's roughly speaking, and he still had a few of those in stock, and that would be the TigerH EDC Store. I'll put a link to that down in the comments, just because I've purchased from him before, and I think that that's a fair price. And then you can go yourself there and look at the other ones that he had, which are now out of stock. And you can see if you hover over them, you can see what the prices were. Like again, looking off at this picture off to the right, you can get an idea. It's a little difficult to determine which one's stainless steel and which one's titanium. Although I think there might be a bluish looking one there that's titanium blued. But the zirconium, I think that's the gold one, and maybe another one that looks blue. Those were initially $95. The zircuti, that forged metal, of course that would be the most expensive. That was about $200. And then was it red polycarbonate? That might have been available in a couple of different colors there, but the polycarbonate was $60. Now this TigerH EDC Store, he didn't have PEI, but he did, no, he did not have PEI, but another store did. And I don't know what that store was, but I can tell you they were asking like close to $100 for it, and that's probably because it's supply and demand, and probably there's a low quantity of those parts. So let's move on from there. So when we do get to a point where we take these apart, we're going to be comparing it with this one, which is the only other piece I have from 42COSMO. This is a collaboration with GD EDC. So this is a metal mechanical version of GD EDC's ball slider, which was called the Full Circle. And now it's being rebranded. The old ball slider has been made a little bit longer, I think, a little bit different, and I forget what it's being called, but I can show you a picture and put the title of whatever the hell it's called up there. But this was called the Mermaid, I believe, or the Mermaid Reborn, and it's mechanical. And I'm hoping that, as far as chronologically speaking, that 42COSMO, I'm wondering and hoping that this was their first attempt at this type of mechanism, and that this was like a later result where they learned from what they did here, because this is much better, and when we take the two apart and compare them, I'll show you exactly why that is. But you know, this is a 6-click slider, 6 clicks in either direction, and it's basically got the same sort of mechanism on the inside, except there's a dual mechanism. There's sort of a carriage in this one that slides back and forth. This one has a stationary carriage or middle point, where you'll find 2 springs and 2 balls oriented in this direction with a ball on either side, and they run up and down a track that has teeth, just like that does. But there's a slight difference in this one, which kind of deadens it. You don't get a good hit when you push forward, and my typical pattern of play is to usually like slide it all the way forward, backward, and then sometimes do that. You can get a little bit of a pop out of it there. Now this is stainless steel. I would imagine that maybe the titanium would make a little bit more of a pop or noise. Also, I do see, if you find the store that has the PEI version of this, their video has the PEI version, and it does have more of a strong pop there. But one of the reasons that that gets quiet there is because of how it's constructed on the inside. So again, they improved that when they did this one, and I want to show you the differences in those. But I think the next thing we'll do is just compare this to a few other existing ones so that you can at least get an idea of the size and shape. And we'll weigh it and measure it, and we'll move on from there. Okay, so let's start with the two things I always start with. Actually, a little tired of starting with these two, but these are two that a lot of you have. So comparison-wise, this is the Metal Toys Top B slider in stainless. This, of course, is the Mackie CP3. Whoops. Then, since we just had it out, we'll get it out again here. The Mermaid Reborn, or the Mermaid by GD EDC and 42COSMO mechanical collaboration. It's pretty big. This is the only other piece I have that's similar design. You have the teeth on both sides, and the springs and balls are oriented in this direction. We won't take this one apart, but this is the Subspace by Wanwu, I believe. Again, this one has a nice crisp, when you get to the end, you get a nice crisp hit. When you slide backward and forward, you get a good crisp hit. But then I'm not sure on this one if it's Teflon or not, because it seems to be a bit, it might be a different grade of Teflon that's a bit more dense, a bit stiffer, but it just doesn't feel like it. I get the idea that it might be some other kind of plastic. Either way, there you can compare those. Size and shape wise, it's fairly close to the Rebound. Again, this gives me that stick of gum idea in my head, although stick of gum isn't quite that thick, but it's a nice fit for your fingers and your hands. Bring this out. I don't know if I did or not. As I said, this makes me think of a stick of gum in a sense. This, the feeling slider from 01 EDC. This one's stainless steel too. This one reminds me of hotel soap, the little bars of soap you get in a hotel, and for some reason I find that very pleasing. Just like this is pleasing because of its size and shape. Another one very close in size and shape is the Gauss Studio Rich version 3, I believe. This is their mechanical, it's a hybrid. It's a mechanical and or magnetic. Right now I have it set up to be mechanical, and you can put magnets in it as well, but then it gets all mushy. So I would either go mechanical or magnetic on this, and the magnetic version of this is very nice as well. I always say if I had the money to blow, I'd buy another one of these just to set it up as a magnetic. But when they're closed, they're very similar. Lastly, and we're going to not get into this one too deeply, but this is another one that I got in the same deal with Kyle Spencer. and that's the Lee slider, and it is exactly, well, almost exactly the same size and shape. And it also has a similar interior function. Now I've added some Teflon tape in my attempts to fine-tune this one, but they are essentially the same size and shape. So if you happen to have one of these, well, you'll know that it's about the same size as this. This may be my next video. We've got some issues with this one that I'm trying to resolve. I'd like to figure out a way to resolve them before I do that video, and then be able to share that with you. But those are everything I figured that it was worth comparing to. Now let's weigh it and measure it. Alrighty. There are no magnets in this, and we are at 52 grams. Dimension-wise, right exactly at 50 millimeters, exactly 20 millimeters, exactly 10 millimeters. Wow, nice proportion. Interesting. Well, what's left to do is to take it apart. So let's get to it. We're going to be using a T6. Got a little fuzzy on my finger. I saw that when I was looking at the first scene. It's too late to take it out now. All right. You can safely remove all 4 of these screws. They might want to stick in there a little bit even after you're done threading them because of the soft Teflon. Okay, got all those out. Now you can just lift this top portion off like that. Nothing's going to fly out of it at this point. Here you have a nice CNC machined top piece. We'll put that up here. We put these little screws in there to keep them organized. Whoops. So now you can see this slides all the way in both directions. And when we take apart this one, you're going to see a big difference about what happens when it reaches this end point out here. It's not a deal breaker. It's an interesting thing I want to point out, and it's definitely a design improvement what they did on that one as compared to what they did on this one, which makes me think that this was probably the first to come out, and that was something that came out later. And hopefully in any future designs of this, they will make some improvements. But we'll move on from there. To get this screw out, we're going to change bits to a T8. Now is where you have to start to be careful, because once that screw comes out, this little metal slug will come out, and what it does is it contains, there's a channel that runs through here and a channel that runs through here, and there's a spring in both of those channels and a ball on both sides of those. You can even see, if I get up here and focus perhaps, you might be able to see the little tip of the ball sticking out. So that is what gives you your ratcheting sound, although technically this isn't what I would call ratchet, whereas the Lee slider is a ratchet mechanism. This is ball and spring. So let's take out that middle part. At this point, I'm going to put my thumb on top of that little middle part, the metal part there, hold it in place. Take the screw out if possible. It doesn't want to fall out on its own. It doesn't necessarily have to. There we go. Be better if it's out of the way anyhow. So you do have to be a little bit careful here. Now when I lift this off, I can now lift off this whole bottom part. But I want to keep my thumb on top of this, keep this whole assembly together. So now you can see underneath, if I let that go, that slug will fall out, the springs and balls will shoot off in both directions. But you can see there are some I believe, permanently embedded glass balls here, because now I've tried. This is definitely Teflon. It's very flexible. If you bend it, it almost wants to stay in the position you bend it in. So don't bend at it, because you may damage it. But I was able to straighten it back out and everything. I was trying to see if I could get those to pop out and maybe try different materials, because those are sort of friction balls or guidance balls. They will run up and down these channels here. You see the channel wraps the whole way around the perimeter, but it only uses these two outside channels. Those balls help guide it. So let me just get that back. Oh, I want to be careful. Put that out of the way. And then we'll turn it back over. And I'm sort of just going to tilt. I'm going to hold it from the front and back, and I'm going to sort of tilt it outward like that, while at the same time keeping my finger on top of here to prevent these two balls from wanting to shoot out. So I'm going to just carefully do that. And there's not too much force in there. There, we got away with it just fine. But once I dump that out, may as well just dump it out. There is not much spring force in there, so they may not have gone flying, but I can never remember, and you can never be too sure. But here we have 2 springs and 4 glass balls. Let's put a few in my hand so you can see what they look like. Good focus. And I wanted to remember to measure those. These are horrible. I really need to spend the money on a good pair of calipers. Okay, 1.8 something, so roughly we'd say these are 2mm balls, but roughly around 1.8 something. And I did get some spare parts. Like I said, I won't bother mentioning them because I don't know for sure what came with it for sure or not, but I did get some extra springs and I think some steel balls. And I do have other balls I could try with this. Nylon, black ceramic, I think. A couple of different ones, but really, since that's a nylon liner, I think hard glass balls or ceramic balls might be the best thing to go with, just to get the most out of this you can. If you really wanted to make it quiet, it's not very loud as it is. If you really wanted to make it quiet, you could even probably find these balls in POM or nylon. Well, I know I have some, but I mean, if you wanted to look on AliExpress or Amazon, you should probably be able to find some. Again, when we take this one apart and compare it a little bit, you'll see the teeth are a bit sharper in this one, I think, than on this one, and I think that would improve the clickability or the haptic response that we get. But, well, let's go ahead and pause here, and then we will pretend that we have to put it back together again. Alrighty, now same sort of process. I'm just going to work backwards. Here's our 2 springs. They're the easiest thing to put in. You want to put your finger on the back side so they don't fall through. And I probably could have done myself a favor by bringing my tweezers over here, but we'll see how it goes. Okay, now I can take 2 of the glass balls and put them in. Whoop, there, it slipped out of my fingers. Again, slipped out of my fingers. Okay, now I've got both of those in. Now what I'm going to do is make sure that side's covered, flip it over, and maybe even transfer it to another finger here. What I want to do is get it started in here. And what I'll do, remember the balls are on this side, not this side. I'm going to carefully put that down in there, set it down in there at an angle like that, and let it fall into place. Okay. Now, this is the side, if I tilt it out, that does not have the balls in it yet. So, we'll put one ball here, and one ball here. And now, you can carefully force it together. Give it a little bit of a test. Yep, everything's working. So everything's put back together again. You don't want to let this slide apart. One of the downsides of this type of mechanism is springs. You don't have much options. He gave me some extra springs, but I think they're all the same, strength. And I think, it's a smaller diameter spring. And the smaller diameter the springs you get, I think the harder it's going to be to find ones that are different strengths. When you get up to the larger size springs, it seems that we can get a little bit of variety there, from soft to medium to hard. But in all of my collections, really, at least these three, and some of them aren't interchangeable. Like the springs in this one are the same size as this, I believe, but they're not the same as that Lee slider. The Lee slider has very small springs. But back to getting this together. We've gotten it to this point, so we can now line up that hole with that hole. Just rest it together. Take a peek through there and make sure you see the holes lined up. Put the main screw back in there. All the while I'm holding this slug down with my fingertip. And then I can get that screw started. Where are we at? We're not on target. There we go. There we go. And just snug that down. Test it again. Everything's working fine. All we have to do now is put the plate back on. But you know what? We're going to hold off on doing that. Put this off to the side. Put these back in here. And we will now take apart the mermaid. So this uses the same size, T6, and it's almost the same principle. These are just coverings on the outside. They're not holding anything in. They're not, no springs are going to fly out or anything when you take it apart. We'll only take apart one side since they're both the same. But here we have a similar construction. Now in this one, the middle piece acts more like a carriage. It's not permanently attached to the top or the bottom. It floats in the middle there and gives us an extended range of motion. And the big difference between these two is when this one reaches its end, you'll see that there's a spring and a ball right here where my fingernail is, but you'll notice there's no teeth. We've pushed it over into a portion of this slot, just like this portion on this end of the slot right here. There's no more teeth. The teeth all end right here. So I have to slide back, let's see, 1, 2, 2 clicks until the balls are finally engaged into the first set of teeth. So when you get to the end, there's probably 2 clicks worth of movement where only these 2 balls and this spring are engaged. And the fact that it's also being stopped, the limiting mechanism is this end part of this plate, and it's Teflon as well. So when it impacts, it doesn't make much of an impact. And that's one of the things I was complaining about when it's all together. And I guess I can put it together without screwing it together. When it is together, there's just not a lot of there's not a good click when you push forward on that. Whereas on this one, you'll see that when that carriage travels, it travels the entire distance, and it has a spring and a ball located on this side and on this side. And maybe if I get close enough and focus, you'll get a glimpse of that as well. Let me point to them. Here and here, here and here. There's a spring right here, a spring right here. In this case, it's duplicated on the other side. But the thing is, when it travels back and forth along this track, all 4 of the balls are all engaged with the teeth all the time. It's not like you get to the end to the last two, and then it goes soft on you. At least one side would sort of go soft while the other side still clicked. So that affects it a little bit. And I might be nitpicking, but it's an interesting thing that they also increased the sharpness of the teeth when you compare that to the teeth on this one, I think. Well, you know, honestly, no. I'm gonna say these teeth are a bit better formed than these. Now, I don't know how much this has been used. It could have worn down a little bit, but this one definitely performs better. And you can't get past that fact that, you know, when you get out to the end there, you're kind of in dead space for a few clicks, and you have that soft landing. I did say though the PEI version of this, or probably the PC version, the PC version would probably be about the same, but the PEI version on the video made a fair amount of noise. So that is that. I don't think there's any need to put all the screws back in here. Just to finish up the video, we all know how to put those parts back in there. So let's get that all out of the way. This is actually 7 clicks. In either direction. Another thing I didn't point out was, what is the top and the bottom? On this one, I consider the top to be whichever plate, whichever side has this surface on it, because it's got that dip in it. You know, that would be the top for sure. This one, at first I wasn't 100% sure, but I think I would call this the top and this the bottom. It just seems to feel better that way, work better that way. I mean, as opposed to flipping this over and using it like this. But there's no reason you can't do that. So, you know, if it works better for you like that, then by all means, go to town. But I think that's all I have to say about it. Thanks to Kyle again. So I got this for, you know, a little bit less than I would have had to pay. And of course it came within days because he is Mr. Efficiency. That's it. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments. I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Thanks for watching. Bye.